Good morning to all. Welcome to another section of this online class. So in the last class we discussed about the poem When I Was Growing Up by Nellie Wong, and today we will be continuing the rest of this poem from the 7th stanza onwards. So in the last class we discussed mainly the first 7th stanza of this poem and also some points regarding the outline of this poem and some major points regarding the author's details. So today we will be continuing the 7th stanza onwards of this poem. So this poem is about the identity crisis of this poet and basically a autobiographical poem in structure and especially in the past tense. And in the last class we discussed about the first 7 stanza, and in the first 4 stanza we discussed about the different experiences or different events that she had in her life, in which someone questioned her regarding her skin, in which she self in her identity she told about the darkness, and then she was compared to her family members, especially her sisters who were in fair in skin. So all these comparison or all her experience was something like a pathetic situation of in her life. Later in the following stanza we discussed about the major events in the films and magazine in which the white people were focused or concentrated in the films, in which the white dominant society only promoted this type of promotions, in which the white people was the center at that time, and all the celebrities and all the movie stars were basically the white. So it was basically a notion or a negative notion in which it gives a poet herself imagined as to adopt the Western language and culture, and also according to this especially according to this point, in which it signifies that how the popular culture of America has cultivated these ideas of beauty by creating the wrong notion of being white. So this culture in which the whites were the good people, or the white was the most beautiful people, all this concept became a culture in that time, or the most popular culture during that time. So it was basically a negative feeling or negative feel of the notion of emotions or feelings and culture during that time. Then in the following stanza we discussed about the dress, the imported cotton dress in which the white people wore. So she also has a desire to wear that type of imported cotton dress, and also she followed or admired the American culture, especially the food and the lifestyle of the American. Then in the following stanza we discussed about the term the hungered. So the hunger means the intensity of her desire to imitate the American white's lifestyle. So it is her desire in order to imitate her the style of America, or especially the American life, American culture in a specific point of view, especially while discussing this point in this poem. So she began to hate the yellow men, and she felt ashamed of being with them, and their acts were considered as cultureless. All these things are followed by this notion, this category in which the term hunger, in which the intensity of her desire to imitate the American white's style. So this is regarding the major points that we discussed in the last class, and also someone asked at the end of this 7th stanza, the society, especially some people, questioned her identity. So this is the beginning or the reality of her identity, in which she faced the identity crisis during that time. So this is regarding the major points that we discussed in the last class. So today we will be continuing from the 7th stanza onwards. So before that, the term yellow town or the yellow people, which means that the people having a yellowish skin, which is regarded as an offensive term for Asians. So it is not at all a good good term during that time, in which especially the Asian Americans or the immigrants from the China in America. So all these people, they hate the yellow color or the yellowish skin, in which it is regarded as an offensive term for Asians. So this is repeatedly this is a repeating term in which the yellow skin, she hate the yellowish people or the yellow skin. All this means that she hate the yellowish things, especially this offensive word of these Asians, in which she hate the dark side of her life or dark skinned people, and she only admired, or her desire was to imitate the white Americans, the American culture, especially the lifestyle and food of the America. So this is regarding the major points in the first 7 stanza, and we are moving to the 8th stanza of this poem. In this stanza we have the same line which is repeating in all the stanza in this poem, which is, when I was growing up, I felt ashamed of some yellow men, their small bones, their frail bodies, their spitting on the streets, their coughing, their lying in sunless rooms, shooting themselves in the arms. So all these things in this poem, in this stanza, specifically in this 8th stanza, which also implies the idea of the yellowish people who was not at all have a good culture, or we can say that they are the cultureless people during that time. In the poet's point of view, the Nellie Wong's the poet's point of view, so she hate these cultureless people, especially the yellow men who especially their cultures, which for example they are spitting on the streets, they are coughing on the street, they are lying in sunless room. All these things are regarded as a cultureless in the point of view of America. So why she hate this yellowish people or yellowish men? The reason behind is that she only admired, or her desire was only to admire or only to imitate the American lifestyle or the American culture. So here we have only the Americans, especially the immigrants of America from the Chinese or the Asian country. They were regarded as the cultureless people. So in this poem, she herself sarcastically she herself denotes how the Americans they neglected or they viewed this category, the immigrants from the Asia, as a cultureless people. So their lifestyle, all their cultures were regarded as a negative feeling or a neglected one in the American culture. So this is regarding this 8th stanza. അതായത് ഈ 8th സ്റ്റാൻസയിൽ പ്രത്യേകിച്ച് പറയുന്നത് അവർ ഈ പോയറ്റ് അവരുടെ തന്നെ കമ്മ്യൂണിറ്റി ആയ യെല്ലോയിഷ് പീപ്പിൾ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ യെല്ലോയിഷ് മെൻ്റെ എല്ലാ കൾച്ചറിനെയും ഹെയ്റ്റ് ചെയ്തു തുടങ്ങി. ബിക്കോസ് ഷീ ഓൺലി ഫോളോഡ് ദി ഇമിറ്റേറ്റഡ് ദി American lifestyle, American culture. So this is regarding the 8th stanza of this poem. So this is just like a sarcastic feeling by this poet in herself, in which she herself just satirically views the main points or the main drawbacks of this Asian American, in which they are regarded as a so-called cultureless people. So this so-called cultureless people, which belongs to this poet herself, so they are regarded as a discriminated people during that time. So this is just a we can say that this is the beginning of this identity crisis of this poet. So from her childhood onwards, we discussed main events, experiences throughout this poem. So every aspect, in every situation, she was discriminated by someone, especially the white dominated society, in which in the form of color, in the form of their culture, in the form of their desire, especially the lifestyle, culture and food, etc. So all these things in the form of their studies, language, and these things denotes that they were discriminated people, or they are regarded as other people in the land of America. So they feel some kind of this identity crisis during that time. So this is regarding the 8th stanza. Now we are moving to the 9th stanza of this poem, in which, when I was growing up, people would ask if I were Filipino Polynesian, Portuguese. They named all colors except white, the shell of my soul, but not my rough dark skin. So she also had another instance or another problem in which she was questioned by some people while she was shopping in the supermarket or in another shops, in which they asked about her origin country, in which if she is Philippine or Polynesian, Portuguese or something like other people, other countries, people from other countries, but only they just avoided the term white, because they only their mindset or they are only concerned about their lifestyle, their culture, especially the Americans. They only concentrate on their white form of culture, white dominated culture, and only they respected the whites. So this is the another point of discrimination in this poem, in which she was just in the poem she was harassed by some people or questioned by or discriminated by some people, in which they asked about her skin or their origin, her origin of country, in which they categorized that all other Asian countries except the all the countries, and according to them the America is the only country who followed the white culture, or they are the most beautiful people, they have a beautiful culture, a good form of amount of culture, norms, rules, all these things, or the food, language, and all these things are regarded, or they themselves regarded as the most important or good aspect of their culture, in which they uplifted their culture, the American white dominated culture, and they just neglected the others' culture, especially this Asian immigrants' culture. So this is the basics or the background of this discrimination or the identity crisis of this poet. So ഇവിടെ ഈ എട്ടാമത്തെ സ്റ്റാൻസയിൽ പ്രത്യേകിച്ച് പറയുന്ന അവരെ കൂടുതലായിട്ടും എല്ലാ കളേഴ്സിനെയും ഒമ്പതാമത്തെ സ്റ്റാൻസിൽ പ്രത്യേകിച്ച് പറയുന്ന ഈ അവർ പ്രത്യേകിച്ച് പല കൺട്രീസിൽ നിന്നുള്ള പീപ്പിൾസിനെ, അതായത് ഓരോ സ്ഥലത്ത് പോകുമ്പോഴും ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻസ് കൂടുതൽ ചോദിച്ചുകൊണ്ടിരുന്നു ഇവരോട്, പ്രത്യേകിച്ച് ഓൺ ദി ബേസിസ് ഓഫ് ദിസ് കൾച്ചർ, ഓൺ ദി കളർ. സോ ഇവരോട് കൂടുതലും ചോദിച്ചിരുന്ന ഇവർ ഒരു വേറൊരു രാജ്യത്ത് നിന്ന് വന്ന് ഫിലിപ്പീൻ ആണോ അതുപോലെ പോർച്ചുഗീസ് ആണോ അങ്ങനത്തെ കുറച്ച് ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻസ് ചോദിച്ചിരുന്നത്. ബിക്കോസ് ദേ supposed to be whites in the America, but they questioned the other people such as the immigrants of America from other Asian countries, especially from China and other countries. They questioned the color or the identity of these people, especially the immigrants from the Asian in America. So this is about the 9th stanza in this poem. So in the next stanza we can see that when I was growing up, I felt dirty. I thought that God made white people clean, and no matter how much I bathed, I could not change. I could not shed my skin in the grey water. So this is another realization of this poet, in which she says that her thoughts was regarding her culture and her identity itself, and she felt that she was dirty, and I thought that God made white people clean, and no matter how much I bathed. So in her point of view, she thought that God made the people in such like the white people clean, and no matter how much I bathed, I could not change, I could not shed my skin in the grey water. So എത്ര തന്നെ മാറിയാലും എത്ര തന്നെ ട്രാൻസ്ഫോം ചെയ്താലും ഒരിക്കലും ഈ ഡാർക്ക് സ്കിൻ മാറില്ല എന്നൊരു റിയാലിറ്റിയാണ് ഇവിടെ പറയുന്നത്. So this according to this poet, the white people is regarded as the very clean, needy and very good people, and they follow a good amount of culture, and the others, all the immigrants or all the other people were regarded as the just like a cultureless people, or the people from other countries. They did not respect her. Instead they just neglected her and just questioned their identity. So this is the basics of this poet's identity crisis, especially not only this poet's identity crisis, the all Asian immigrants in the America, their identity crisis is just explained in these lines. So this is regarding the next stanza of this poem. And in the next stanza, in this stanza of also in the following the last lines, she says that I could not change, I could not shed my skin in the grey water. So she is very bothered about. She was very concerned about the some basics or the very change in which she know that she never changed from a dark person to a white person. Basically, she was the Asian, so never any transformation or any development or any shortcuts used, she never transformed into a new person or a new white person. She will be always a dark person. So this is just a reality of this poet or the overall the Asian immigrants. So we discussed the 8th, 9th and 10th stanzas of this poem, and in this stanza we get a clear idea about how she was discriminated, or how she was neglected by the other people, especially the white people, the white dominated culture, and the pains and sorrows that she faced during that time. So regarding the last stanza we discussed, she felt that her dark skin was dirty and tried to wash it away, and then she says that I could not shed my skin in the grey water, and then she swore she would run away to somewhere unoccupied with the yellow people. So it was just like a escape from the reality in which she was just suffocated in this in this terms of this identity crisis, in which she faced many sufferings or pathetic feelings during that time. So she wanted to escape all this reality to somewhere unoccupied with the yellow people. So somewhere the place without a yellow people. Yellow people means here the Asian immigrants. So she wanted to escape from their culture and to follow the American culture. So here in the 11th stanza, while we are going to discuss the 11th stanza, we can see that when I was growing up, I swore I would run away to purple mountains, houses by the sea, with nothing over my head, with the space to breathe, uncongested with the yellow people, in an area called Chinatown, in an area I later learned was a ghetto, one of my many hearts of Asian America. So in the following lines, she says that she wants to escape from the reality. The reality here, just like the discrimination or the identity crisis that she faced there. So she wants to escape from all these problems, all these sufferings, into another place where the yellow people was not occupied there. So she terms a place which is called as a Chinatown. So here the Chinatowns means an area of the city outside China where many Chinese people live. So this is another term in this poem, in which it generally means an area of the city outside the China where many Chinese people live. So this is a group of people, Chinese people, who live there without any attachment to their country, especially their own country. They just live in just outside of their country. So this is regarding this. We can say that this Chinatown means a other place of Chinese people to live with their cultures, to live without another problems or other dissimilarities and all these difficulties. They will be free at this specific place, which is the Chinatown, which means that a place, an area of the city outside China where many Chinese people live. So in the 11th stanza, the poet says that I swore I would run away to purple mountains, houses by the sea, with nothing over my head, with the space to breathe, uncongested with yellow people, in an area called Chinatown, in an area I later learned was a ghetto, one of many hearts of Asian America. So So it was just like only just like a desire or only just an imagination in which she want to leave this space from America in order to escape from all these discriminations, all these minor problems, especially based on this identity crisis. So she want to escape from all these problems or all these difficulties, and she want to live in the Chinatown, an imaginative place where an area where the Chinese people were live without any problems during that time, and it was just a ghetto in which of many Asian Americans were think of. So this is just like a imagined country, imagined locality or imagined area in which they thought about their freedom, or they themselves thought about their freedom from all this discrimination and all this identity crisis. So this is regarding the 11th stanza. So ഇവിടെ പറയുന്ന മെയിനായിട്ട് ഈ പോയറ്റ് ഈ ഇത്തരം ബുദ്ധിമുട്ടുകൾ ഇത്തരം ഐഡൻറ്റിറ്റി ക്രൈസിസ് എന്ന ഒരു ഈ ഡിഫിക്കൽട്ടി പ്രോബ്ലംസ് എന്നൊക്കെ എസ്കേപ്പ് ചെയ്തിട്ട് വേറെ പ്ലേസിലേക്ക്, ഒരു ഏരിയ ഓഫ് ദെയർ ഓൺ ഐഡൻറ്റിറ്റി, അവരുടെ ഐഡൻറ്റിറ്റി റെസ്പെക്റ്റ് ചെയ്യുന്ന സ്ഥലത്തിലേക്ക് പോകാൻ വേണ്ടി ഈ പോയറ്റ് ആഗ്രഹിക്കുകയാണ്. ആ പ്ലേസാണ് ചൈന ടൗൺ എന്നൊരു പേരിൽ വിളിക്കപ്പെടുന്നത്. സോ ഇറ്റ് ഈസ് ജസ്റ്റ് ലൈക്ക് എ imaginative place in which one of the many hearts of Asian America think of. So this is regarding the 11th stanza, and her imagination is that she want to run away to purple mountains, houses by the sea with nothing over my head, with the space to breathe. ഇവിടെ പറയുന്ന അതായത് ഫ്രീ ആയിട്ട് ഒന്ന് ജീവിക്കാൻ വേണ്ടിയിട്ട്, പ്രത്യേകിച്ച് ഒരു സീയുടെ സൈഡിലൊക്കെ ആയിട്ട് കുറച്ചുകൂടി ഒരു ഫ്രീഡം കിട്ടാൻ വേണ്ടിയിട്ട് അങ്ങനത്തെ ഒരു ഇമാജിനേറ്റീവ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു ലാൻഡാണ് പറയുന്നത്. സോ ഹിയർ ദി പോയിറ്റ് നീഡ്സ് ഓർ ദി ഏഷ്യൻ അമേരിക്കൻ immigrants need just like the freedom or the liberation from all these difficult problems, especially based on this identity crisis. So we are moving to the last stanza of this poem, which is the 12th stanza, in which she says that I know that when once I long to be white, how many more ways you ask, haven't I told you enough? So this is the concluding stanza of this poem, in which she concludes this poem with a note of self-realization about her identity, and she reconciles herself with her Chinese American identity, thereby dismantling the stereotype of the Western beauty cult. So in the last stanza, 12th stanza of this poem, she deals about the basic realization that she had. So in the last stanza, we discussed about her imagination, especially the Chinatown, that she want to go to this place, specific area, and she then says about this area later learned as a ghetto. So ghetto means a slum area. So this was the reality in which all these Asian immigrants who gathered to a common place or specific area, that area became a ghetto or a slum area of the Chinese people. So that was another reality behind this poem. So she was not at all happy with these questions or the basic of this identity crisis in this poem. So she talked about her life, herself, and also her group, the group of Asian immigrants in America. So with this note, the last lines, which means that I know now that once I long to be white, so it was her desire to become a white person, then how many more ways you ask, haven't I told you enough? So it is just a question in which she do not like to follow the white or the white culture at the end of this poem, or the end of her life, in which she got a piece of a reality, or she got a note of self-realization about her identity. So when she realized about her identity, her own culture, her own language and her own culture, overall culture. So all these things, she with a note of self-realization about her identity, she just neglected, or she just overthrew this American white-dominated culture in such a way that she reconciles herself with her Chinese American identity. So ഈ പോയറ്റിൻ്റെ അവസാനത്തിൽ ഈ പോയറ്റിനെ, ഈ നെല്ലി വോങ് എന്ന പോയറ്റിനെ സ്വയമായിട്ടൊരു ഐഡൻറ്റിറ്റി, പ്രത്യേകിച്ച് ഈ ഐഡൻറ്റിറ്റി ക്രൈസിസിനൊരു അവസാനം എന്ന രീതിയിൽ സ്വയമായിട്ട് അവർക്ക് ഒരു തിരിച്ചറിവ് വരുന്നൊരവസ്ഥയാണ്, സെൽഫ് റിയലൈസേഷൻ വരുന്നൊരവസ്ഥയാണ്. ദാറ്റ് ഹെർ ഐഡൻറ്റിറ്റി ഈസ് ഗുഡ് അറ്റ് ഓൾ ആൻഡ് ഷീ ഓൺലി ജസ്റ്റ് ഫോളോസ് ദിസ് ഫോം ഓഫ് ദിസ് their culture, their language and their food and lifestyle, all about their culture. So she reconciled herself with their Chinese American identity, which means that she then after all these situations, all these neglections, all this discrimination, she then follows her own identity, which is the Chinese American identity, thereby dismantling the stereotype of the Western beauty cult. So the Western beauty cult is regarded as a stereotype. It is a real stereotype in which it is made up of some forms of beauty, some forms of culture, some forms of lifestyle, food, all these things. So all these stereotypes was dismantled by accepting their own, especially this Asian American identity, which is the Chinese American identity. So she, at the end of this poem, she says that she accepted this Chinese American identity and thereby dismantled the stereotype of this Western beauty cult. So she, with a specific note regarding self-realization of her own identity, she concludes this poem in a typical manner, which means that she realized about her own identity and she is happy with that. So this is regarding this poem. So this poem is written in past tense and divided into 12 stanza, in which each stanza tells about the experiences and events of her own life in the chronological order. So this is basically a autobiographical poem. So with by discussing, by studying this poem, we get a clear idea about the biography of this poet, which is the Nellie Wong. So this poem, which is When I Was Growing Up, is regarded as an autobiographical poem by Nellie Wong in a very well structured manner. It used very simple words, simple terms and a simple form of structure, and all the divisions of stanza is very precious or very precise and very beautifully written, this poem, in a very simple language. So with this poem, she tells about her life herself and some experiences, some problem, especially the identity crisis, the discrimination of towards these Asian American people, immigrants. So all these things is discussed in this poem. So this is regarding this poem, which is from the page number 42-43 in the page the textbook. The chapter is When I Was Growing Up by Nellie Wong. So we completed the poem by Nellie Wong, which is the When I Was Growing Up. So now we are going to analyze this poem in a very short manner. So this poem is written by the famous Chinese American writer Nellie Wong, who is best known for her themes of feminism and identity. And this poem is autobiographical, and at the same time it represents the plight of all women immigrants in America, and it talks about the writer's past and her journey from childhood to adolescence. And with each passing stanza there is a progression of time, attitude and outlook. So this poem is about the her identity crisis, and especially she focused on the plight of all women immigrants in America. And also this poem is about the writer's past, which is about this poet itself, who is Nellie Wong, and her journey from childhood to adolescence. So this is regarding just an outline to this poem. And while we are analyzing the entire poem, we can see that the poem opens with the thoughts of a young girl who wishes to disown her identity and culture and tries to fit into the dominant dominant white majority, and she talks about the discrimination that she faced because of her appearance and color, and expresses her desire to be like the fair, blonde, sensuous, desirable American woman. So this section is about her desire to become a so-called white people or a white man, in which she admired the white man's culture or the white dominated culture, and she want to become, or she want to imitate their culture. Then in the following lines, the discrimination was so evident that she started believing in her own darkness and began wearing the imaginary pale skin. So this is another regarding her self-realization, in which the discrimination was so evident that she started believing in her own darkness. So she herself believed in her identity first, which is the darkness of her side, or the dark skin personality and identity, and began wearing the imaginary pale skin. Then she says that in spite of having a good command over the American language and American lifestyle, she was still an un-American. So this is just like a self-reality about herself, in which she admired, or she followed, she imitated all the cultures, language, lifestyle of America, but at the end she know that she understood that she still was an un-American. So she is only an immigrant from China in America, so she is labeled as a so-called term which is un-American. So this is another important thing in this poem. Then following in the next following lines, she recollects the memory of being selected by a white man with happiness, and she says that it made her feel special and precious. She started believing that she represents the Eastern beauty. So she herself make an identity, especially the Chinese American identity, and she represents this identity as the Eastern beauty. So this is just edge over the Western beauty, which is the Western beauty means the Americans or the white dominated culture, and the Eastern beauty means the immigrants from China in America. So these Asian immigrants in America, they are regarded as the Eastern beauty, a concept of their beauty or culture, in which she started believing on her own identity, and just overthrew or neglected the identity crisis which she faced very pathetically, painfully in America. And then she compares her own people, which means the Chinese men in particular, and men from the East in general, to the white man, and feels that the former is inferior to the latter in all aspects. So she just compares the white people with the Chinese immigrants or the Asian immigrants, who is basically known by the name yellow people. So she compares her own people with the Chinese men in particular of and men from the East in general to the white men. So she just compares herself or her group with the against the white people or the white dominant culture, and then she says that she is ashamed of her people for their uncultured ways and habits, and she then moves on to talk about the insensitivity of people who take her identity for granted. So she then talk about her change in attitude, in which she was ashamed of her people, in which she herself regarded as a cultureless people, a group of cultureless people, and they call her the people in the America, they call her Portuguese, Polynesian, Philippine, without the slightest concern of her feeling. So she has no particular identity in the America, and the other people or the American society called her like a Philippine or a Portuguese and such other person, in which it generally means that the lack of identity or the identity crisis of this poet or the group of these Asian American immigrants. And all these lead to a major shift in the poet's attitude and tone. And later at the concluding part of this poem, she understands that however hard she may try, she is always the other. So the other means the category which is neglected by the people in America, the all category who are neglected by or discriminated by the American people. And this other, she however she may try to, she is always the other for the whites, and she accepts her ethnic identity and breaks the American stereotypes of beauty. And then she yearns to run to her homeland where she can breathe freely and be her own self. So this means that she want to free from all these identity crisis and all these sufferings and all these problems, and for that she accepts her ethnic identity and breaks the American stereotype of beauty. And also she says that the how the American considered herself as like the other, which is the neglected people or the other people in the American country, and they are labeled as the un-American, which means that they are just an immigrant in America from other countries, especially the Asian American people. So this is about the identity crisis, and at the end she accepts her ethnic identity, which means that she accepts her own identity and breaks the American stereotype of beauty, and she yearns to run to her homeland where she can breathe freely and be her own self. So this is regarding the last concluding part of this poem. So this entire poem is about the identity crisis which is faced by this poet, especially the Asian American immigrants in America. So they faced many problems, they faced many discrimination, especially we can say all these difficulties, all these problems as the identity crisis which was faced basically by these Asian American immigrants. So this is regarding this poem. We analyze this poem in a very short manner. So go through the textbook from page number 40 to 43rd in which the poem is in the textbook. So go through all the lines, all the stanza. It is very beautifully written in a very good manner with the past tense as the major tense in this poem, and also the divisions, the 12 stanzas in poem is about her ideas or her experiences, her events and all the life events about herself and her peer group, which is the Asian American immigrant. So that's regarding this poem. So go through all these lines, all these notes in the while we discussing. So that's for today. Thank you. So we completed the first chapter and the fourth chapter from the module 1, which means that we just completed the module 1, and in the following classes we will begin the next module, which includes some speeches, testimonies, etc. So that's for the further information regarding this syllabus in the paper signatures. So that's for today. Thank you. Happy learning.